There's a certain silence that only exists in places abandoned by life. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the heavy, breathing quiet that seems to pulse against your skin, whispering that you don't belong here. That you're trespassing in a world that remembers. I felt that silence the moment we pulled into Daniel's driveway. The tires of Ethan's battered car crunched over dry gravel, sending up little puffs of dust that floated like spirits in the dying light. Ahead of us, Daniel's farmhouse loomed a crooked skeleton against the bleeding hues of sunset. The windows caught the last glint of the sun and threw it back at us like cold, dead eyes. Ethan whistled low. "Rustic," he said, grinning. I didn't answer. My throat had tightened the closer we got. The kind of instinctive dread you can't reason away. You can only feel it, gnawing at the base of your skull like an invisible hand tugging you backward. Daniel waved from the porch. His figure was almost swallowed by the shadows pooling around the house. Only his arm moved, slow and mechanical, like a figure in an old music box winding down. "Come on, man," Ethan said, grabbing his duffel bag from the back seat. "Don't be weird. It's just an old house." Maybe it was just an old house. But as I stepped out into the heavy evening air, the house seemed to lean closer like it had noticed me. The front door groaned as Daniel opened it, the sound stretching out too long, as if the house was reluctant to let us in. The first breath I took inside made me gag. It smelled wrong. Not just of dust or mildew but of something sweet and sour, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. It clung to the back of my throat, thick and oily. The living room was worse. The floorboards sagged under our feet, protesting every step. Thick cobwebs clung to the corners like skeletal hands. An ancient stone fireplace sat against the far wall, cold and blackened, with a portrait above it so faded I couldn't tell if the figure it depicted was smiling or scowling. The air was heavy here. Like it had been waiting for something to stir it. I shifted my backpack higher on my shoulder, forcing a smile. "Nice place," I croaked. Daniel laughed. "It's got character." We set up our sleeping bags in front of the fireplace, facing the battered old TV Daniel had dragged out of storage. Ethan had brought a stack of horror movies, old classics, mostly, and a garbage bag filled with chips, soda, and junk food. We were supposed to stay up all night, laughing at bad special effects and predictable jump scares. We were supposed to be safe. As Daniel fumbled with the DVD player, Ethan flopped down onto his sleeping bag, opening a bag of chips with a loud crackle. Outside, the last traces of sunlight vanished behind the dense line of trees surrounding the property. The house seemed to settle deeper into itself, creaking softly like old bones. I sat cross-legged on my sleeping bag, watching the dark hallway that led deeper into the house. There were no lights on down that corridor. No doors open. Just a long stretch of darkness, humming quietly. I told myself it was stupid to stare. It was just a hallway. Just a shadow. But still, I couldn't look away. The first movie flickered to life, a black and white zombie film with dramatic music and stiff acting. Ethan and Daniel howled with laughter at the cheesy effects, tossing popcorn at the screen. I laughed too, but it felt hollow. Forced. My eyes kept drifting back to the hallway. And once, just once, I thought I saw something move. A flicker. A ripple in the dark, like a curtain brushed by an invisible hand. I blinked hard, shaking my head. "It's just your imagination," I told myself. "It's the movies getting to you. That's all." Around 11 p.m., Daniel got up, mumbling something about the bathroom. I watched him disappear down the hall, the light from the living room chasing him a few feet before surrendering him to the dark. The movie droned on. Ethan dug around for another soda. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. I checked my phone. 11:17 p.m. Still no Daniel. I nudged Ethan. "Dude," I whispered. "He's been gone a while." Ethan shrugged. Maybe he fell in. He laughed under his breath. But the joke didn't land. The house was too quiet now. Even the floorboards had stopped creaking. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Coming from the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Each step seemed to press harder than the last, as if something heavy was dragging itself forward. Ethan turned, expecting Daniel to appear. But the footsteps stopped just short of the living room. No one came out of the dark. Ethan called out, voice cracking slightly. Daniel. No answer. The TV buzzed in the background, forgotten. I felt the hair on my arms rise. A primal instinct I couldn't smother. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. A minute later, Daniel walked casually into the room from the opposite direction from the kitchen. He frowned at us. "Why'd you call me?" he asked, wiping his hands on a towel. I was getting water. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. If Daniel had been in the kitchen, then who or what had been walking toward us? The silence that followed Daniel's return was worse than any scream. Ethan tried to laugh it off, cracking a joke about the house having ghostly plumbing, but his voice wavered. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe his own words any more than I did. Daniel shrugged and sat back down, grabbing a handful of chips like nothing had happened. The movie started again, its flickering black and white images dancing on the cracked TV screen. But something had shifted. The house had changed. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe, like every molecule was being squeezed by invisible hands. The shadows in the corners deepened, bloating and pulsing like something alive. And the hallway behind us, the dark artery leading deeper into the house, felt like a gaping mouth, yawning wider with every passing second. By midnight, exhaustion gnawed at the edges of my mind. The kind of bone-deep fatigue that makes your eyelids heavy and your limbs ache. We unzipped our sleeping bags, moving slowly, our bodies sluggish like we were underwater. Daniel clicked off the TV. The sudden darkness pressed against my eyeballs like a fist. Only the faint orange glow of a bathroom nightlight down the hall offered any relief from the thick blackness. I crawled into my bag, pulling it up to my chin. The floor was cold beneath me, a deep, seeping cold that felt older than the house itself. Ethan mumbled something about setting an alarm for breakfast, but his voice was muffled and distant, like he was already halfway into sleep. Daniel grunted in reply, shifting in his bag. Then, silence. For a while, I lay there staring at the ceiling. The beams overhead looked like the ribcage of some giant, long-dead animal. The house creaked and settled around us, the sounds distant and meaningless like an old man muttering in his sleep. I told myself I was being stupid. That I was safe. That there were three of us here, not alone. But deep inside, a primal part of me, the part of every human that remembers the feeling of being prey, knew better. It started as a whisper. A soft, rhythmic sound at first, barely audible over my own breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. But it wasn't coming from Ethan. And it wasn't coming from Daniel. I held my breath, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate. It was coming from the foot of my sleeping bag. I squeezed my eyes shut. It's just the house, I whispered to myself. It's just the house. But the sound didn't go away. If anything, it grew louder. Closer. The darkness pressed against my skin, thick and damp, like 1,000 invisible fingers creeping over my body. Somewhere deep in my mind, a voice, small, terrified, whispered, "Don't move. Don't breathe. It knows you're awake." I lay there frozen, my muscles screaming, my lungs burning for air. The seconds stretched into hours. And then, a sudden shuffle. Soft. Deliberate. Something was shifting, repositioning itself, as if studying me. I couldn't help it. I had to look. Slowly, with a terror so sharp it made my vision blur, I cracked one eye open. At the foot of my sleeping bag stood a figure. A tall, dark silhouette darker than the night itself. Motionless. Watching. I couldn't make out its face. I couldn't even tell if it had one. It simply existed, a void in the shape of a man. Every instinct in me screamed to scream. To thrash. To run. But I was pinned, trapped by a fear older than memory. The figure didn't move. It didn't breathe. It simply waited. I squeezed my eyes shut again, forcing my body into stillness, praying that if I didn't acknowledge it, it would go away. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time had no meaning here, in the belly of this living, breathing house. Finally. A movement. Not walking. Not stepping. Gliding. The figure slid backward, melting into the blackness of the hallway without a sound. The moment it vanished, my body broke free. I sat up with a gasp, dragging in air like a drowning man breaching the surface. Ethan stirred beside me, groaning. "Dude, what's wrong?" he mumbled, half asleep. I opened my mouth. But stopped. What could I say? There was something watching me. A shadow man stood over my bed. They would laugh. Or worse, they would believe me. And then it would be real. "Nothing," I whispered hoarsely. "Just a bad dream." I lay back down, pulling the sleeping bag tight around me like a shield. But sleep never came. I spent the rest of the night staring at the dark hallway, waiting for the figure to return. Morning couldn't come fast enough. But even as the first pale light leaked through the cracked windows, the house didn't feel any lighter. If anything, it felt disappointed. As if whatever watched us wasn't finished. Not yet. The morning arrived not like a blessing, but like a slow, reluctant truce. Pale sunlight bled through the warped wooden blinds, painting weak, sickly stripes across the floorboards. The house didn't feel relieved by the light, it felt restless, as if it were waiting for something unfinished. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, my muscles aching from a night spent paralyzed by fear. Across the room, Ethan snored softly, oblivious. Daniel stirred, yawning and stretching his arms overhead. For a fleeting second, I wondered if it had all been a dream. Some cruel hallucination spawned by exhaustion and too many horror movies. But the second I turned my head toward the hallway, I knew better. The door to the far bedroom, the one that had been shut tight when we arrived, now stood ajar. Just a crack. Wide enough for something to slip through. The same hallway where the figure had disappeared. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. Every instinct in me screamed to look away. "It's nothing," I lied to myself. "It's just the house settling." But deep down, I knew houses don't open doors by themselves. Not doors that had been locked for years. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling. As I gathered my things, my hand brushed against my backpack and I froze. There, smeared across the fabric, were faint streaks of dirt. Fresh dirt. My heart hammered in my chest. I hadn't dropped my bag outside. There was no reason for it to be dirty. Unless something or someone had touched it during the night. Ethan groaned awake, rubbing his eyes. "Damn, my back's killing me," he muttered. "You sleep okay?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I lied. Daniel joined us, looking paler than usual. His phone buzzed loudly in the hollow quiet of the room, making us all jump. He answered, frowning deeply as he listened. When he hung up, his face was drained of color. "That was my grandpa," he said, voice tight. "He says, we need to leave." Ethan laughed nervously. "What? Why?" Daniel hesitated. "He just said he had a bad feeling." "A bad feeling?" Those words echoed in my skull like a funeral bell. Bad feelings don't wake old men out of bed early in the morning. Not unless they know what's lurking in the dark. We packed quickly. Faster than any of us wanted to admit. As we stuffed sleeping bags and backpacks into the car, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. That something unseen was hovering just out of sight, silent and patient. Before climbing into the car, I dared a final glance back toward the house. The front door, the door Daniel had locked behind us, now hung open. And for the briefest moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in the shadowed doorway. Tall. Still. Waiting. I blinked and it was gone. We tore down the dirt driveway, gravel spraying in all directions. Nobody spoke. Not until the house was nothing more than a distant smear in the rearview mirror. Only then did Daniel break the silence. "My grandpa," he began, his voice shaking. "He told me something. Last night." Ethan glanced at him warily. "What?" Daniel swallowed hard. He said, "The house was built over an unmarked grave. Some old farmer who just disappeared one night. They never found his body." He paused, staring down at his hands. "Some people think he never left." Nobody laughed. Not this time. The realization settled over us like a shroud. I closed my eyes, the image of the shadow standing at my sleeping bag burning into my memory. It hadn't been just a bad dream. It had been real. The ride back to town was a blur. I barely remembered the trees flashing past, the broken lines on the road slipping away under the tires. All I could think about was the figure. Its stillness. Its silence. Its hunger. We pulled into Daniel's driveway around noon. The sun hung heavy in the sky, bleaching the world into dull shades of gray and white. But even here, even in the bright warmth of midday, the fear clung to me. As I grabbed my backpack from the back seat, something caught my eye. A smudge. Dark brown. Pressed into the car's fabric seat right next to where my sleeping bag had been. A footprint. Not mine. Not Ethan's. Not Daniel's. Too large. Too deliberate. Too fresh. I stared at it, my mind blank with terror. Because the house was miles away now. The house was behind us. But something had come with us. That night, alone in my room, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind, every shifting shadow made my heart lurch. At 3 a.m., I woke with a start. Not from a nightmare. From breathing. Not mine. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the foot of my bed. I didn't look. I didn't dare. Somewhere deep inside me, a cold certainty bloomed. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The road twisted and bucked beneath the wheels of Maya's car as if it resented our presence. Beyond the cracked windshield, the world unfolded in a messy sprawl of trees and mist, endless and wild. The sun hung low behind thick gray clouds, and a thin drizzle misted the glass, blurring the edges of everything. Perfect, I thought bitterly. Exactly the kind of setting where people vanish. Ethan sat beside me, scrolling through his playlist, oblivious. In the back seat, Jake was cracking jokes, trying too hard to keep the mood light, while Lila and Sam exchanged weary looks. We were 5 in total, 5 mismatched friends clinging to the frayed excuse of a weekend getaway. No plans. No responsibilities. Just an old house Ethan's cousin had recommended, cheap, isolated, forgotten. The kind of place where no one would hear you scream. When we first saw the house, we fell silent. It sat hunched at the end of a crumbling gravel drive, half swallowed by encroaching trees. The porch sagged under its own weight, the windows dark and hollow. Ivy strangled the walls. The house wasn't abandoned, technically, but it looked like it had been waiting for something for a long, long time. You sure this is the right place? Maya asked, wrinkling her nose. Ethan shrugged. Address matches. Besides, it's cheap. What'd you expect? A 5-star resort. Jake laughed, but even he sounded nervous. No one wanted to be the first to step inside. The front door groaned like something dying as we pushed it open. The air hit us in a wave, stale, thick, heavy with dust and something else. Something sweet and rotten, just faint enough to make you question if you smelled it at all. The living room opened up before us, wide and yawning. Faded wallpaper peeled like sunburned skin. An old sofa slumped in the center of the room, cushions torn and leaking yellowed stuffing. Above the fireplace, a large, ornate mirror hung crookedly, its surface warped and dull. I caught a glimpse of my reflection, stretched, thin, wrong, before I looked away. Okay, Lila said, dropping her duffel bag with a thud. This place is gross. But it'll do. We laughed too loudly, too sharply. Because the alternative was admitting we were already afraid. We picked rooms quickly. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, each worse than the last, sagging beds, cracked windows, mildew-stained walls. Sam volunteered to crash on the couch downstairs, claiming he liked the rustic vibe, but really, I think he just didn't want to sleep alone upstairs. None of us did. At the end of the upstairs hallway was a door unlike the others. It was heavier, thicker, painted a deep, sickly red that flaked off around the edges like dried blood. A black iron padlock hung from the knob, crusted with rust. Taped to the door was a single, yellowed sheet of paper. Do not open. Simple. Final. A nervous giggle escaped from Maya. Oh, come on, Jake said, swaggering up to it. It's probably just a supply closet. Or, Lila said darkly, it's where they keep the bodies. We laughed again, but it sounded thinner this time. The door remained silent, indifferent to our presence. And the house seemed to lean in closer, listening. That first night, we tried to pretend we weren't unsettled. We cooked instant noodles in the ancient, wheezing microwave. We drank cheap beer around the fireplace, trading stories, trying to fill the vast, heavy silence that pooled in the corners of the room. Outside, the trees shifted and whispered in the wind. Inside, the house seemed to breathe the soft creak of wood, the sigh of settling foundations, the almost imperceptible pulse of something older, deeper. Jake couldn't leave the locked door alone. I caught him more than once that night, lingering near it, his hand resting on the cold iron lock, his head tilted as if listening. You hear something? I asked him once, half joking. He smiled without humor. Doesn't it feel different? He whispered. I didn't answer. Because he was right. The air around that door was colder. Denser. As if the house were exhaling all its worst parts into that one space. At midnight, when the others finally dozed off, curled in their sleeping bags, lulled by exhaustion, Jake stayed awake. And so did I. I heard the click of his lighter as he padded down the hall. The faint jingle of metal as he picked the lock, easy, quick, too practiced. The door swung open with a soft, reluctant sigh. A gust of cold air spilled out, heavy with dust and something sweeter, cloying, syrupy, the smell of things rotting under plastic wrap. I sat up, heart hammering. Jake, I hissed, but he had already disappeared inside. The door swung closed behind him. The house seemed to exhale a long, slow, rattling breath of relief. Or anticipation. I waited 5 minutes. 10. No sound. No movement. Finally, I stood, every instinct in me screaming against it. The hallway stretched out before me, impossibly long, impossibly dark. The open red door gaped at the end like a mouth. When I reached it, I hesitated. Inside was nothing but blackness. A space that should have been a simple storage room, small, mundane but instead felt vast, endless, impossibly wide. I called Jake's name. Once. Twice. No answer. I turned back, the skin on my arms crawling. And that's when I noticed something. The mirror at the end of the hall, the crooked one above the fireplace, was no longer crooked. It was perfectly straight. And in its reflection, the hallway was empty. No red door. No open mouth. No me. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs, and slammed the door shut with all the strength I had. The padlock hung uselessly from the knob, swinging slightly. Behind the door, the house exhaled again, pleased. Somewhere, deep beneath the floorboards, something shifted awake. I ran back to my sleeping bag, pulled the covers over my head like a child hiding from monsters. But even then, I could feel it. The house watching. Listening. Waiting. Morning never truly came. The sun dragged itself up behind the heavy clouds, but its light barely scratched the surface of the house. Everything remained soaked in that gray, sickly gloom, a half-light that made shadows stretch longer than they should, made corners seem deeper. I barely slept. None of us did. We gathered in the living room, bleary-eyed, nursing cheap instant coffee like it could save us from something we didn't want to name yet. Jake wasn't there. Maybe he's still upstairs, Ethan offered, voice rough. We all knew it was a lie. I saw the way Maya kept glancing toward the stairs, her fingers twisting around each other. Lila wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. We were all thinking the same thing. Jake had gone into the red room. Jake had not come out. By noon, we started pretending again. Playing board games we found buried in a moldy cabinet. Watching old VHS tapes on the battered TV. Anything to fill the space, to keep the silence at bay. It worked. For a while. Until the whispering started. At first, I thought it was the wind. A low, barely audible hum threading through the cracks in the walls, soft as breathing. But then it shaped itself into words. Fragments. Broken, garbled. Come closer. Forgotten. Let us in. I snapped my head toward the others. Judging by the tension in their faces, they heard it too. Sam turned off the TV, plunging the room into deeper quiet. The whispers grew louder in the silence. They weren't coming from the wind. Or the walls. They were coming from the red door upstairs. Maybe it's just the pipes, Lila said weakly. No one answered. Because the house had no plumbing anymore, the realtor had said so. No working water. No heating. Just wood and dust, and whatever had been waiting behind that door. That night, no one volunteered to sleep alone. We dragged mattresses and sleeping bags into the living room, clustering around a cold fireplace like children around a dying campfire. The fire wouldn't catch. The matches burned out, one after another, hissing like snakes. Finally, Ethan gave up, cursing under his breath. We lay in the dim glow of our phones, too scared to sleep, too scared to talk. Somewhere upstairs, the red door creaked open again. I don't know when I fell asleep. I just remember the dream. I was standing in the upstairs hallway, facing the red door. It was wide open now, yawning into endless darkness. Inside, shapes shifted, tall, thin figures made of smoke and shadow, whispering in a language my mind couldn't hold onto. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But my body moved without me, stepping forward, pulled by invisible strings. As I crossed the threshold, a cold hand brushed the back of my neck. I woke with a scream locked in my throat. The living room was empty. The clock on the wall blinked 3:07 a.m. Somewhere upstairs, floorboards creaked. I sat up slowly, heart hammering. Maya. I whispered. Lila? Sam. No answer. Only the house breathing around me. I crept toward the staircase, every step a thunderclap in the oppressive quiet. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out longer than I remembered. Warped. Twisting. The red door gaped open. And Maya stood in front of it. Her back to me. Her head tilted sharply to one side, as if listening. "Maya," I whispered. She didn't move. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, rising and falling like a sick heartbeat. I stepped closer, reaching out. She turned. Her face was wrong. Too smooth. Too blank. Her mouth twisted in a slow, unnatural smile that split her skin too wide, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too many. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. The thing wearing Maya's face stepped toward me. Behind it, in the dark mouth of the red room, something shifted. Something bigger. Something hungry. I ran. Tripping down the stairs, slamming into walls, barely able to see through the tears streaming down my face. When I burst into the living room, Lila and Sam were still asleep or pretending to be. I didn't wake them. Somehow, instinct screamed that drawing attention would make things worse. Instead, I crawled into my sleeping bag, heart thundering, eyes locked on the staircase. Waiting. Listening. At dawn, Maya was gone. We searched the house. Every room. Every closet. Outside, in the choking mist that clung to the trees like spider webs. Nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No sign she had ever been here at all. Only the red door, still yawning open at the end of the hallway, pulsing gently like a wound. Lila broke first. "I'm not staying," she hissed, grabbing her bag. "I don't care. I don't care if we have to walk back to town, I'm not staying another night." No one argued. But when we stepped outside, the world had changed. The forest was different. Twisted. The trees leaned in closer, their bare branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The driveway was gone, swallowed by undergrowth that hadn't been there the day before. No path. No road. Nothing but endless, writhing woods. The house had us now. And it wasn't going to let us go. We didn't talk about Maya. Not really. Not out loud. Her name lingered in the back of our throats, sour and heavy, but none of us dared say it. As if giving voice to her absence would summon something worse. Instead, we went about the empty rituals of survival. Checking windows. Testing doors. Mapping the house again and again, hoping for an exit that refused to exist. But every hallway, every room, even the ones we thought we knew, shifted when we weren't looking. The house was rearranging itself. And we were its furniture. Sam was the first to change. At first, it was little things. Longer silences. Blank stares. Forgetting where he was or who we were for a few terrifying seconds. He would laugh it off, pretending it was nothing. But his laughter was wrong. Too hollow. Like someone wearing his voice like an ill-fitting coat. One evening, if you could even call it evening, in the endless gray half-light, we found him standing at the foot of the staircase, staring up toward the red door. He was murmuring to himself. I leaned closer. At first, I thought he was praying. Then I caught the words. "Let me in, let me in, let me in." Again and again, like a cracked record. Ethan grabbed his shoulder roughly. "Sam. Snap out of it." Sam jerked like a marionette with cut strings, blinking rapidly. "What?" he mumbled, voice thick with confusion. Ethan let go of him, stepping back. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. We all saw it. The way Sam's shadow, long and bloated under the flickering light, lingered half a second too long after he moved. The way it twitched, independently. That night, I dreamed of the red room. Again. But this time, it wasn't empty. This time, the figures had faces stretched and wrong, mouths pulled too wide, eyes empty and endless. And in the center of the room stood a mirror. A tall, ornate thing, framed in black iron twisted like thorns. In its glass, I didn't see myself. I saw the house. Breathing. Waiting. I woke with a gasp, drenched in cold sweat. And found Lila standing over me. For one terrible moment, I thought she wasn't Lila at all. Her face was wrong, sagging, drooping, and her eyes were hollow pits. Then she blinked, and the illusion shattered. Just Lila. Tired. Terrified. But for a moment, she hadn't been. She crouched beside me, her voice a ragged whisper. "We have to leave," she said. I nodded, throat too dry to speak. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "We go. Even if we have to run into the woods. Even if we die trying." She glanced toward the staircase. "We can't stay here. It's eating us." I agreed. Of course I agreed. But deep inside, a colder part of me, the part the house had already touched, whispered, "There is no leaving. Not anymore." Morning came. Or what passed for it here. A sickly gray light that pooled weakly through the grime-smeared windows. We packed what little we had, bags heavier now, sagging with unseen weight. We didn't speak much. Sam trailed behind us, moving oddly, head twitching to some silent rhythm only he could hear. Ethan kept glancing at him, worry etched deep into his features. We made it to the front door. The old lock groaned and snapped under Ethan's desperate wrenching. Freedom. Sunlight, pale and thin, but real, spilled across the threshold. I almost wept. And then Sam screamed. A raw, animal sound that ripped through the silence. We turned. He was staring at something behind us, eyes wide, mouth gaping in horror. I turned, heart hammering, and saw it. The hallway behind us was changing, melding, folding into itself like rotten paper. The walls bubbled and split. The floors cracked open like dry skin. And from the wound of the red door spilled figures, thin, spindly things made of smoke and teeth and nails, crawling toward us in jerky, unnatural movements. Lila bolted. Ethan grabbed my arm, dragging me through the open door. Sam didn't move. He stood rooted to the spot, his mouth working silently, tears streaming down his face. The figures swarmed him. Swallowed him. The last thing I saw before Ethan yanked me outside was Sam's face stretched into a rictus grin as the shadows poured into him, around him, through him. And then the door slammed shut behind us, rattling the entire house. We ran. Branches slashed at our faces. Roots clawed at our feet. The woods seemed endless, infinite, but we ran anyway, blind and desperate. When we finally stopped, gasping, bleeding, shaking, the house was gone. Nothing but endless trees and mist. No sign of the road. No sign of salvation. Only the deep, gnawing certainty. We hadn't escaped. We had simply been released. We didn't know how long we wandered through the forest. Hours. Days. Time dissolved in that gray, endless fog that muffled every sound and bled the color from everything. We were just shapes moving through wet leaves and bare branches, breathing shallow, stepping quiet. Like prey that had already been seen. Lila walked ahead, hunched and quiet, eyes always scanning. Ethan followed me closely, his steps uneven, limping from the fall he took hours earlier. We didn't speak. There was no point. Somewhere behind us, something moved. Always. Not close. Not far. Just there. Like a shadow stretched across reality. Like a thought that wouldn't leave your mind, no matter how hard you tried to forget. We eventually found the road again. Or a road we weren't sure. It looked familiar, but everything in this place did. Like the world had been copied poorly from memory, just slightly off. We followed it, and it led us back to town. Just like that. Like the house had grown bored of us. Or worse, it had gotten what it wanted. No one believed us. Of course not. We didn't tell the full story, just that we got lost, that one of our friends ran off into the woods and we couldn't find him. There were searches, police reports, interviews. Eventually, it all faded away. Jake, Maya, Sam, gone. Just names on an old file. People nodded sympathetically, shrugged, moved on. We didn't. We couldn't. Because we brought it with us. The first time I saw the red door again, I was in my apartment. Middle of the night. Lights flickering. I'd just gotten out of the shower, still dripping, still trying to convince myself that I was okay. That it was over. And then I looked in the mirror. Not at myself, not exactly. At the reflection behind me. A hallway. One that shouldn't be there. With a door at the end. Red. Heavy. Breathing. I turned. Nothing. Turned back. The mirror was empty again. But I knew. It had followed. Lila stopped answering my calls a week later. I went to her apartment. The door was locked from the inside. Lights off. No signs of a struggle. No signs of anything. Just a single smear of red paint on the bathroom mirror. The shape of a door. Ethan lasted longer. He kept busy, drowned in noise, people, distractions. He thought that if he never looked back, it couldn't catch up. But it did. I found him sitting on his bed one night, motionless, his eyes wide and blank, staring at the corner of the room. There was nothing there. At least, that's what I told myself. He whispered to me without blinking. I never closed the door, he said. And then he smiled. The same wrong smile Maya wore. That night, Ethan walked into the lake behind his building. They never recovered his body. I'm the last one now. And I don't sleep anymore. I can't. Because when I sleep, I see the red door. When I close my eyes, I hear the whispers. When I breathe too loud, I feel something breathe with me. It waits in mirrors. In silence. In places you forget to fear. It doesn't need the house anymore. It has me. I've started seeing it in other people. On the train, across from me. A man with two wide eyes and lips that twitch when no one is watching. At the grocery store, a child staring too intently into a freezer door, mouthing something only he could hear. In reflections. In windows. In dreams. The red door is spreading. I think it always was. You're reading this now. Maybe you think it's just a story. A campfire tale. Something to laugh about in the light of day. But tonight, when your house grows too quiet, when your reflection doesn't quite move right, you'll remember this. You'll remember the red door. And when you hear it creak open behind you, don't turn around. Don't speak. And for the love of God, don't let it in.